Okay. Let's see, volume-wise, how that does. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be making another painting by another one of my very, very favorite artists. Today we're looking at arguably the greatest wildlife painter in Canadian history, even though technically he wasn't a Canadian. He spent a long time, pretty much most of his adult life, in and around Banff. His name is Carl Rungius, and let's get right to it. So I want to show you a little bit of some information about today's artist, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how we're going to begin the painting, and then we're going to begin the painting. If you're just watching me for the very, very first time and you don't know anything about the sort of the process of these things, if I was watching this episode, I'd probably just jump right to the very end, see what the resulting painting is, and then go back and be like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a painting I want to do, and it looks like it turned out pretty well. So, knock on wood, let's see if we can get to, we can match a little bit of the greatness of this fantastic artist. So, we're going to be painting this painting. It's called Lake O'Hara. Let's see, which is a lake in British Columbia. It's fairly close to Lake Louise in the Rocky Mountains, which is also relatively close to Banff, which is a large national park, as well as Lake Louise. Is Lake Louise a national park, or is it just a town, and is it just a lake? Somebody will let me know in the comments. This, because I know that there's, obviously there's a lot of people in Canada are very familiar with Banff. It's sort of like one of the premier destinations if you're interested in to see the Rocky Mountains and wildlife. But if you're not from Canada and you've never heard of Banff, you certainly should put it on your bucket list. I would say Banff has there's this large national park in Western Canada, right in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, in this sort of bowl between a bunch of different mountains, and there's fantastic views of the mountains. You're almost guaranteed to see some deer, maybe a buffalo, maybe a bear, lots of ducks, etc. So it's a major tourist attraction. And hey, if you're in Canada right now and you've never been to Banff, there's no tourists from outside of the Canada allowed in, so you got the whole park to yourself. Anyway, let's jump in here, because this is an outline that I've created to help you get the composition started. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. So you can take this outline, you can print it out on your computer at home, or your printer attached to your computer at home, just using any kind of paper you like. And I'm going to show you how I'm going to transfer it onto this blank canvas. This is a 9x12 sized canvas, and I'll show you how to do that in a few moments using some carbon paper or graphite paper, whichever one works. I will let you know that you can find this file here in a Dropbox folder. There's a link in the description below, and you can click on that link, and you'll see all the other artworks that we've done in this series. Some of these names I'm sure you've seen many times. Salvador Dali and Leonardo da Vinci, probably the biggest heavy hitters on here. Maybe Francisco Goya, maybe Tom Thompson, perhaps Jasper Johns. Charlie Russell we did just a couple days ago, and here we are, Carl Rungius here. And then coming up just next week, wow, we've got some great artists. Philip Guston, one of my favorite, Marcel Ferrand, a hugely popular artist in Quebec, in Eastern Canada. And then we're going to do a whole week of Van Gogh painting celebrating the anniversary of Van Gogh's death. and then Spider-Man, etc. So lots of stuff coming down the pipeline. I'll also let you know that there is a private Facebook group just for people who are painting along with me, and I encourage you to join that. There's a link to that below where you can see the artwork that people are working on. Most of the time it's people who are painting like today's painting and uploading their versions of today's painting, but often people are posting other things here, including the artwork that they're working on outside of class, which is, I think, ultimately where we all want to get to, is that we're making art that is not like an assignment or something that we're doing here together, but something that you've initiated purely out of your own interest. So that's all there. It's a really cool resource. I think it's a very supportive community. I'm very blessed to have people like you who are watching right now. And so if you want to join all those people, it's totally free, not promoting or pushing any kind of secret agenda on you. It's something that kind of grew out organically from other students in the class. So this is some images here. This is just a quick Google image search just to show you some of the artwork that Carl is famous for. And I think you'll probably, if just scanning through here really quickly, the thing you probably notice right off the bat is almost every single painting here, except for two, have animals in it, right? Because his premier ability was painting wildlife, and he could do it fast, and he could do it with a high degree of anatomical correctness, so much so that people who are interested in, you know, a bear, for instance, who go like, yeah, okay, that's, you actually got like the muscles there, the hump is in the exact right place, etc. Similarly, like Charlie Russell, the Western painter we looked at on Tuesday. He's, you know, very famous for being able to, he was a cowboy himself, and he knew the anatomy of a horse. He knew the way that the ankles and the knees bent and where the muscles were when it was riding up on its hind legs. Carl Rungius was also like a student of nature, studied these animals up close. He had a studio in Banff that he would go to at least once a year for the last 50 or so years of his life. And as I said, it's very easy to see wildlife in its natural state there. So I just wanted to show you that because he is a wildlife painter, and today's painting, the one that I'm going to do, you could doesn't have any wildlife in it at all. Which is, you know, I'll say that in that same Dropbox folder, when you click on the Dropbox folder, you're going to see two other paintings in there. And as well, there is outlines for both of these paintings if you would prefer to do one of these other paintings. I had of all the artists, I think, you know, we're on artist 97. This got to be Carl Rungius, might be one of the most difficult artists for me to choose a painting for us to do, because there are so many great paintings, and each one is different. They're dynamic, featuring. He has a cast of characters of maybe 5 different animals. You got like these bighorn sheep. You have bears, moose, foxes and wolves, and there might be 1 or 2 other, but really those are the kind of the animals he was most interested in, and also the animals that are kind of mostly common in the Banff area, so he would obviously have more opportunity to see them, and they represent a big part of like Western Canadian identity. I was born an hour east of Banff in Calgary, Alberta, and spent a lot of my time as a child, you know, on weekend trips to Banff, etc. Summers and winters, right? It's great skiing in that neighborhood. Anyway, if you wanted to do one of these other paintings, I've included them in the Dropbox. It's all free for you to download if you want to pursue those. I might do one of these later on in another episode sometime in the future, because I just think these are gorgeous. But the reason why I chose this one, we're painting a wildlife painter and we're making a painting of his that has no wildlife in it. Because there's a number of reasons. I had no idea that this painting existed until I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this artist because he's closely affiliated with Banff and Calgary, and this week it's the Calgary Stampede. And so I was thinking, like, who's an artist that really represents the myth of the wild Western Canadian spirit. And his artwork, the main body of his artwork is in the collection of the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, which is really one of the best museums in Canada. And so they have like 80% of his paintings are in the museum's collection. Very few of them are ever on display at any one time, unfortunately. They really should have like a floor dedicated to his work. I think at one point in time he was a gigantic figure in art. And then I think, over the years, different movements, pop art and abstract expressionism have kind of popped up and kind of pushed him to the kind of the fringes, I would say. But I think there's still a lot of people that look at this artwork and love this artwork, including myself. But the reason why I chose this painting here is I think it's a gorgeous painting. The colors in this painting I just fell in love with. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh man, I think we have to do that painting. And the other reason, beyond just like my selfish need to want to paint a beautiful painting like this and the colors, is because, and we'll talk about this as we go through here, this is a really interesting example that kind of warm and cool colors, of an artist using warm and cool colors in perhaps a different way than we've used over the past almost 100 paintings. Because what we have up front here is we have a very cool blue, and then in the background we have this warm blue. And if you've heard me talk ad nauseum about warm and cool colors, you generally want your cold colors in the background and your warm colors in the foreground, right? Because those colors will naturally move to those places, right? And artists use warm and cool colors to help create depth in their paintings. But what do you do when there's an object that has a cold blue, like this water, that is in the foreground? Well, that just throws our rules right out the window, doesn't it? Maybe not. So we're going to talk about how we can use this sort of perfect exception to the rule, but not really defy the rules as we've come to know them. And I'll talk about how he's able to still create a great deal of depth in this painting while using a cold color in the foreground and a warm color in the background. So I think this is like, for me, it was like, this is a painting that I need to paint because it can really, I think, cover some interesting ground for people that may have had this exact question in the back of their mind over the past 6 months painting along with me. Okay, so let's dive in there. I see lots of comments in the chat, so I'll get to that here in a second. Let's start prepping this canvas to sketch onto. So here is, there we go. Okay, so here's the canvas, and just as a quick, this is a 9x12 canvas. People will ask me all the time, if you want to get this exact one, there's a link to an Amazon page in the description below. You can buy the exact one. So then I've got some. So what I do is I take this canvas. It costs about $2. I usually get like 50 of them at a time for something like $70 or something, right? And then I take some white gesso and I put white gesso on top of it, even though it already comes pre-gessoed. My goal is to get personally, I want my canvases to be as smooth as possible. That makes the application of paint that much easier. So now there's 2 coats of gesso on here, and now I'm going to take a block of sandpaper. See, I just take a piece of 2x4, wrap it around, and put some staples in there. Keeps it nice and attached to the wood. And then I just give it a good little sanding. And sometimes you can see that powder all over there. I think the sandpaper could be replaced shortly here. Okay, so let's put this on here. And tape it down and trace it. This one is a relatively straightforward canvas. So if you didn't have any carbon paper and you didn't, you could fairly easily sketch this one out. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the paper down a little bit more. I want a little bit more, just a little sliver of the sky. Personally, I want a little bit more of that. You could go even higher and you could cut the sky right out and focus more on the logs that are at the bottom down there, but I'm just telling you what my personal preference is. So I'm going to put that there. I'm just going to be a little bit mindful. This is really the only place where we kind of want this to be relatively level and parallel to the top or bottom of the page. So here's some carbon paper. Let's put a sheet of this, and you can see I've used it many times. It's got lots of, so I could probably get another 10 paintings traced out onto canvas with this same piece of paper. Okay. Over this next few days, I'm planning on doing I'm planning on doing outlines for a lot of the upcoming episodes. So you'll see, if you see in the Dropbox, there's I think 50 we're at episode 42. I think I've got up to like episode 60 already uploaded to the Dropbox, all of the outlines. Now you'll see that, like today's episode, some of those folders have 2, 3, 4, 5 outlines for paintings in there because I had a hard time deciding which artwork to do for each artist. You know, when I first started this whole series, you know, if I was like thinking of an artist, I would just sort of spend maybe a half hour online looking at some images and thinking like, okay, who do I want to do? What is the easiest image here for an introductory painting class? Okay, found it, good, let's trace it, boom, upload it, done. And then I think as this whole series has progressed, I've become more personally invested in each painting, and man, like today's episode, I probably spent 10 hours just looking at books by this artist and really painful decisions, like laying in bed at night thinking about all this stuff that I know nobody else really cares about, but that's sort of the curse and the reward of being an artist, really, is the you end up obsessing about things that other people are totally willing to overlook. But I think that's also, I've been told anyway, that that's a sign of an artist. And really, as an artist, you should be more concerned than anybody else about the artwork that you make. Right? Because if you don't care, then why should anybody else, right? It's sort of like you wouldn't trust a chef that won't eat their own food, right? You're like, oh, why? Okay. Every time I walk by that restaurant, the chef is sitting on the corner eating McDonald's. That would make me very suspicious, right? One thing, just as I'm tracing this, you should also notice that I'm quite careless and about how I trace these images, right? I'm not worried about going, okay, gotta go up and go down. Like, I'm just like, okay, because I just want to get the basic composition, where the shapes are on this page here. Now we're going to put some paint over this in just a couple seconds, and some of this information is going to disappear. So, if anything, one of the things that I think about in this whole tracing process is it's sort of like my first it's like I'm practicing the painting in a way. Like, I'm just thinking about my hand moving over the surface, occupying this space, and I'm getting familiar with this environment. You know, it's like you hear of skiers, like professional skiers will go down, will sometimes walk down the ski hill before the race, so they're trying to visualize all of the turns that they're going to do before they actually do it, right? And maybe it sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of how I feel about that whole process, and I really think drawing is a very important aspect of painting. Okay. Over the past few days, I've been just a lot of stuff is, there's new lenses on some of these cameras, new mounts locking things down, none of which you can see. That's one of you spend like hours and hours doing all this work. No one notices any difference. Although the one thing that should be different should be less problems than there has been in the past. But I don't want to knock on wood on that. I saw the comment there. Sandy said the music is too loud, so hopefully that change that I just made addressed that. So I appreciate those kind of comments, because sometimes I can't hear the music myself, otherwise you'd hear this crazy echo. So I'm going to put down this warm yellow. I'm going to cover the canvas with it, as I almost always do for every one of these episodes. So let's put a bit of water on there. This is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting with acrylics. Those of you that have done the whole 45 episode intro to painting course that I did from September to February of earlier, or last year, I guess, know that I did use oil or water at times during that class, because that was really a total intro class. And if you don't have access to some mediums and gels and all that kind of stuff that we are using more frequently today, then I think it's helpful for you to see how you can, kind of make do, I suppose. But really, adding water to your paint is not only unnecessary, I think it ultimately makes your life more difficult if you're painting with acrylic. And so therefore not desirable. You also see I like getting the edges of my canvas. Okay. So already, I know it seems ridiculous, but just that yellow for me, already I feel like we've got something along the lines of what this painting should look like. So let's put them side by side. I already feel with this yellow that we've got some of the glow that we see in the painting there on the left, in Carl Rungius's painting, Lake O'Hara, right? Because I think what's great about his painting is how it just seems there's just like the color leaps off of the page, right? It just sticks out. So, and part of that is this warm yellow glow that's coming through. Now, did he use a warm yellow like this as a background? I don't think so. I think he probably used a much more muted, brownish color. Often artists would use like a kind of like a khaki color, a taupe, sandy brown kind of color, an earthy brown, earthy red color. So he probably did that. I use this warm yellow because it's much faster than mixing a brown. The differences, especially for a beginner painter, are negligible. Like by the end of the painting, it's going to be, you know, this will do is it sort of like adds a like 15% extra saturation to your color, which I like. I love bright like colors, but I know not everybody does. So anyway, so let's start putting some colors on the palette here. I'm going to use a little bit more of this warm yellow. Cool red. We're going to use a little bit of blue towards the very end of the painting, or sorry, a little bit of black towards the very end of the painting. So I'm not going to put any on now. If we look at that painting here, really the only black that I see is right up here. You might say, oh, there's some black here. I think that's just a really dark blue. Even this could be just a really dark blue. But I think more than many of the paintings we've looked at, this one, I see him really applying like the same sort of techniques, warm and cool color techniques that we've been using throughout our times together. So that for me is really exciting. You're like, oh, look, somebody's doing exactly what I've been teaching. And because artists don't always use, like, you know, there is infinite ways to make a painting. So I don't mean to say that my way is the only way, my way is the best way. There's I don't know, so let's say there's been 200 million artists in the history of humanity. There's been 200 million different ways to make artworks, to make paintings, and I'm just one of that vast number of artists. Having said that, it's sort of like I was thinking this morning, I'm trying to kind of almost like create a unified theory of painting that that can work best for especially beginners and intermediate artists. As you get more into painting, you start to kind of creating your own system for yourself. But I think most of the instructions that are given to beginners artists are just way too complicated and confuse people, and ultimately just scare people off. And they're just like, I don't know, painting is so difficult. I tried it, but you know, there's all these different palettes, and I've got 30 different colors, and I spent $1,000 on supplies, and I still don't feel like I know anything. That is like that's horrible. That's horrible, and that's then the fact that that's most people's experience making art and painting is like is tragic. For somebody like me who's dedicated their life to making art, it should be much easier for the average person to be able to get started. Okay, well, great questions. Okay, so Eleanor in the chat says, why warm yellow in the background and not cool yellow? I have often wondered about it. Great question. And how about I'll answer that question, but I don't want to diddle daddle around, so I'm going to try to get things going, and then I'll answer your question while we're thinking. So let's just take a look at this painting and just sort of maybe think about how we're going to go from our next step here. We've got our warm yellow that we've used to prime the surface with. So usually the way that I approach each painting is to start in the background. Come on. And then work towards the foreground. And I often do at least 2 back and forth, often 3 times. So what I would do is paint this background, and then paint these trees, and then paint the water. I might use some of the same colors. If I've got some of this warm blue, I might put a bit of it down here. But working from the background to the foreground. And then that would be, once you've got that established, that's, if you're looking for a place to stop, that would be a great place to stop. That'll be about an hour from now. And then what I would do is go back, work on the background again, work on these trees, which is your middle ground, and then work on the foreground. And ideally, in an ideal world, especially if you're moving a little bit quicker, then you might be done. But usually what I would do is go back to the background, maybe do a little bit more touch-ups, a third pass at that, and then work my way back to the foreground and then finish. Now, stuff happens along the way, and you drop a paintbrush, or I've often got an ice pack up here because it's so hot in the studio, and water drips down right before I think I'm done, and then I got to do little touch-ups in the background and so forth. But so what I wanted to look at here is these colors in the background, and what colors do I want to start applying over here. So the first thing we want to think about is, remember I said right off the top, is that warm colors advance, cool colors recede. And that's why on our palette we have a cool blue and a warm blue. We got a cool yellow and a warm yellow. And we've got a cool red and a warm red, right? So that, if we want to put a blue in, and we want it to go in the background, then we want to usually find some combination of cool blue that we can put it in. That will make that space recede backwards. Just like if we want to have a blue in the foreground, we would kind of go towards adding blue, like a warm blue, because that's going to make, it's going to kind of pull towards the viewer, right? And if you were to paint those 2 colors side by side, which we've done even just on Tuesday when we had a cool blue, cool brown, in the background and a warm brown in the foreground, and it was just pretty clear which was front and which one went backwards and which one came forward, right? But the thing is in this painting we have this cool like emerald, almost emerald greenish lake, right? Cold water in the middle of the mountains. You know, this is one of the highest places on Earth in terms of elevation, or at least in North America, right? You know, it's higher than, you know, it's like Calgary and Denver are like the two largest cities at the highest elevations in North America. I'm sure there's might be some other major city, but really they're high up in the mountains, and Banff is even higher up into the mountains. So, you know, you have, you know, these snow-capped mountains and this freezing mountain lake, and there's probably also minerals in there that make it that this glowing, cool greenish blue. So we've got this cool color here, and then we've got all these bluish purples, these warm purples in the background. So how do we make this painting without causing this weird inversion happening where these mountains want to leap towards us and this lake almost appears to flip backwards into space, right? The key is white. When we tint a color, it loses its saturation and gives the effect of receding backwards into space. If you've ever looked at, you know, at anything far away, you don't have to be in the mountains to have this experience, but if you're in your car and you're driving down the highway, you know, look at your steering wheel. You got your steering wheel in front of you, and look at the color and the values in your steering wheel. You'll see that they are the sharpest details, right? Obviously, if you got your nearsighted or farsighted, blah blah. That okay, but if you have your glasses on, right? The steering wheel should be the sharpest details, and they should, and the blacks and the whites of those values should be the most intense and the highest contrast, right? And then if you look down the street or down the mountains or pathway or whatever towards the horizon, everything starts to kind of get a little bit hazy. You know, depending on the clarity of the atmosphere and where you are on Earth, it can be hazier or less hazier. But what's happening is that there's particles of water and other substances in the air that diffuse the light and make it, you know, it tints that color in reality, right? So adding white to the color will also give it that sense that there is space between us and it. So that's really what I want to focus on today, is really investigating how we can use white to tint a color, and even if it's a warm color, it's going to go further backwards into the distance than a cool color. And likewise, this cool color in the foreground, there is a bit of white in it, but not nearly as much white as there is back here, right? So it's going to be a fun challenge for us to do. And it's also going to help us answer Eleanor's question about why we're using a warm background over top of instead of a cool background. Okay, so I think we're just going to start mixing color, and then I'll more specifically answer Eleanor's question here. So let's go to a medium-sized brush. And what I'm going to do, we've got a number of colors here. I think what I want to do right off the top is I'm going to mix a gray, and I'm going to mix a cool gray, which we can add to any of the colors we're going to be making. And that gray, that cool gray, is also going to have that effect of pushing things backwards into space. Okay, so let's go to this view here. So to mix a gray, we want to have essentially 4 colors out of these 6 in our mixture, right? Because obviously I could just take, you know, the quick and dirty thing, and you can even buy gray tubes of paint, and often there's different, you know, values. We have like a darker gray or a lighter gray, and you could get all those and you could have them in your studio, and you could just skip this step entirely. I personally think, especially if you're a beginner artist, it is worth your time learning this exercise. As much as it's easier to just jump right to that gray, understanding how to mix gray is like one of those things that when I was learning to paint kind of blew my mind. Because when I look at this, you think like, wow, look at all these bright colors. You're telling me I can get like a gray out of this? Doesn't make any sense, right? So, and like I said, we want a cooler gray because we're going to put it into the background. So let's start with our cool colors. We're going to mix all three of the cool colors on the palette together. And in fact, I'm going to use all of that yellow. I'm going to take some cold blue. And I'm going to take some cold red. And you can see how when I scoop them out, I kind of put them off to the side here. That way I can drag a little bit more color in as needed. I mean, I think I'm going to use all of it shortly here. But, so I've taken my three cold colors and I'm mixing them together. And if my proportions are relatively equal, maybe, you know, I probably have 40% yellow, 20% red, and 10% blue, which is 70%. So I probably have maybe 50% yellow and then the least amount of blue in here. Because the blue is just going to make that color darker and darker and darker as we go. And I'm just going to mix. I'm mixing maybe a little bit more of it. That way I can always kind of go back and use it. And okay, so you're looking at this and you're like, wow, that's great. You got a brown. Okay, that's I thought we were making a gray, right? So we are, but I think it's important to understand, like we're sort of learning how to make a brown, and then we can make a gray afterwards. But so now we got this cool gray. Just a couple days ago, we made a warm. Okay, we mixed a cool brown, and just the other day we made a warm brown side by side. So if you want, you can just watch the previous episode on Charlie Russell to see that towards the beginning of that episode. Now let's convert this brown into a gray. And the way to do that is, again, if we think about the color wheel, this is the neutral core. When colors crisscross through the neutral core, they lose their intensity. Our most intense colors are right on the outside edge, right? But when they go through the neutral core, they become more and more gray. That's why when we mix a warm yellow with a warm blue, we get a much different green than when we mix a cool yellow and a cool blue, right? Here we got this beautiful, like this is closer to the color we're going to put in the foreground. We're going to mix a cool yellow and a cool blue, and we're going to get this, it'll be probably closer to this with a little bit of white, but we'll get that kind of really bright, cool color of the lake. Anyway, so what we've done so far is we took a cool yellow, cool blue, we got this nice bright green, and then we added some red to it, which turned it into a brown. So we kind of pulled this color inward towards the neutral core, but we really want to yank it firmly over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding some of the warmer colors to that same color. So let's take a bit of our warm red and add this to our mixture. Keep on adding. I'm just going to put all that yellow in there. We're going to need all this, I think. The more blue I put in here, the more it's going to help it go gray. The more red that's in there, the more brown it will go. Okay. And I'm going to put a bit of warm blue in there as well. Okay, kind of a gross looking mixture, on a little bit more on the greenish side of things. So one way we can really tell what color we're looking at is we start adding white to it. So let's just take this color, take some white and mix it here. And you're like, wow, well, that looks kind of like a greenish gray. Right, so if it's too green, let's add a little bit more warm red into this mixture. Big slop of color. Okay, and then I'm just going to start mixing it off here to the side. Okay, so this is a bit of, it's still a lot of color in here. I could keep on mixing this for a while, but really what we're going to use this to do is to modify the colors as we mix them anyway, so I don't need to be perfect. This would be a good kind of very organic color we can use for our background. I know if you're looking at this, you're like, sorry, where exactly do you say we're gonna use that color? Well, we're gonna mix this color that we have here into some of these blues and purples. Okay, so let's now mix a purple, various different kinds of purple that we're going to put into our background. Okay. So to make a good purple, what we want to do is take some cool red and some cool blue. Now there's a bit of yellow and stuff that got on my brush as I took it to paint with it, but okay. So here's this purple. Let's put a bit of white in it just so we can see how it changes when we add white to that same color. Kind of nice Technicolor version. Let's just take a little bit of this color. It's kind of a bit of a grayish color, and we mix it there. I don't know if you can quite see the effect, but so it's turning it. We're by adding gray to it, so we add white to this color, we're modifying the tint. We add gray to this color and we're adding tone, or changing the tone of it. If we ever add black to it, we'd be changing the shade, or adding shade to it, or shading it. Right? So here we still have a kind of a really nice purple, but it's been modified. We're diluting its intensity, and it's going to want to go backwards. Now, on its own, right here, compared to these purples, it's like, oh, that's an ugly color. But guarantee when if we start painting these colors into the background, they're going to look right. So that's why it can be complicated being a beginner artist. Is until you start using these colors and painting with them, it's hard to really to see why they can work, right? So where should we begin here? Let's take this color we just mixed, And then let's kind of just go in, and I think let's paint, let's just go right in here. And I'm going to kind of paint maybe some of the bluer areas here. Or this is more of like my purpley color, but there'll be plenty of opportunities to go more blue later on. Let's say, pick this up here. So I'm sort of painting in, I guess you'd say, maybe some of the darker colors on this mountain here. So here's where I'm starting to kind of look at this image more closely and to see if I can kind of pick out the major forms, like the shapes. You can see I'm painting quickly, and I'm not really too obsessed with, you know, getting any kind of perfect details in here. Okay. So what's nice about this, I've got these purples in here, but they're gonna, especially when we paint some blues over top of them, we're gonna have this kind of warm kind of color coming through there. Okay, so let's just continue doing this, but let's make it maybe a little bit more purpley. So I'm gonna take a little bit more of this same color. Let's put it here. Steal some of this purple. Now let's just take a bit more white and add that into the color. So now we're just going to look at the same painting again. So maybe this is sort of a little bit lighter areas in the same image. Not the lightest, but kind of the next step. Alright, so you can see a little bit of a difference there. And I'm just sort of going pretty quickly. I'm not too concerned about being perfect. You might make some different decisions right here than I am. Alright, and that's totally fine. That's what's really fun about painting alongside other artists, is often you come away with very different paintings, but there's sort of these weird things that kind of somehow bubble through, like the essential form, or you can almost get very mystical about it. Okay, I'm going to keep on going here. Let's just add even more white to this, to the same purple. And I'm even going to take a bit of this bit more cool yellow, or sorry, cool red. Oops, maybe a little much. Let's take a bit more gray in here. So it'll be a little bit more on the cool red side of things as opposed to just purple. And even if there's white on the canvas, I'm going to paint over it all. Okay. Let's keep on going. I'm going to take even more. Maybe that's a little too much red. Let's take some white. And again, a bit of this gray. I'm just going to amp it up even more, just to speed this whole process up. Alright, I can even paint over some of the other things that are there. Just sort of, I don't need to hide all of the yellow. I just want to kind of occupy a bunch of that. Okay. Okay, so there's the beginnings of our background. Now when we do another layer over top of that, this is just going to like zing or sing. Sorry, I got something in my throat there for a second. Okay. Okay, so get back into Eleanor's question about the color and why we're using the warm yellow. In earlier episodes, you know, I think as we've gone on, I've streamlined and simplified things, because I've thought to myself after an episode, like, wow, I think I might have made that a little bit more complicated than necessary for beginner artists. So, and there's many different ways of going about this, but often artists will, rather than just paint one solid color like I've done here, might be a little bit more nuanced and might actually paint a cool yellow in the up here and maybe a different color in the sky, etc., before putting on those final layers of color. And you don't see any of this yellow afterwards. But artists will do that because those colors, even though they're not necessarily fully visible in their complete natural state, or as local colors, they mix optically in the viewer's mind, so the viewer's not even conscious of these things happening, but the colors are mixing in their brain, right? So often artists will use, like, I'm trying to remember what paintings we did. We've done paintings where I literally put a cool color in the background and a cool yellow in the background and a warm yellow in the foreground to help that. But then I thought, like, you know what? I think it's a little bit more complicated than necessary. However, having said that, personally, I like a nice, bright, warm color underneath, because it makes it, like, because the way that light works is light is going to come down and it bounces, it kind of goes through, it like drills through the surfaces of all these paints, depending on how opaque they are. Most of these paints are semi-transparent. It goes all the way down to the bottom where the white of that canvas is, and then it bounces back up through, and then it's refracting, bouncing around, and then it hits our eye, and then our brain does a whole bunch of extra work. So we're perceiving all these colors, whether we're conscious of it or not. Is the vast majority of people who've never painted before are not aware of that happening. So does that answer the question? For me, it's a bit of a shortcut, but it also works, right? And I think these classes are really helping me to develop this theory, and I think obviously I more and more I'm just like, you know what, let's just paint it yellow all the way across, because I don't think for the majority of people it's going to make any difference whatsoever. You could, if you, like, we did a painting where we did a cool yellow. Whose painting was that? It was a winter scene that we did months and months and months ago. Let me see. I think it was in our intro painting course. Was it? It was an Anne Savage painting. Let me just bring that up on the screen here. So we did this painting back in, I don't know, maybe December or something around there, early January of this year. And I actually used a cool yellow over the whole thing, like we did on here, because I really wanted to get a very cold quality and really reinforce the coldness of that, of this wintry scene. Having said that, other people went back to and used the warm yellow, and actually I think it might have worked out better, even though because generally people want a painting that glows with warmth than a painting that is kind of icy cold. Which makes a lot of sense. If you're going to put this in your house, you want something that feels inviting, and an environment that you literally want to step into, right? Okay, so I'm going to keep on plowing ahead here. I'm going to go directly into the sky with some cool blue and some white here. Even though I could modify it, like I could add some different colors in here, but just the way that he's got it going, and for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to add some white. Maybe I'll steal a little bit of this gray and some blue here. We need a little bit more. Oh, look at that gorgeous color. Right, and then I'm just going to put this into the sky. You know, if you're really interested in this whole idea of color, and specifically like the background color, one of the things that we also did many episodes ago when we did our Hilma F. Klimt painting, which was paintings 7 and 8 of that Intro to Painting series, I literally divided those canvases into 4 quadrants, and then we added like a warm yellow, a cool yellow, I think a warm blue and a cool blue or something like that, and we painted over. And you could see, even though we used the same colors over top, you could very easily see that how those first colors on the white canvas ended up affecting the final one. So you, as an experiment, you could do the same thing. You could divide it up. You could put all sorts of different colors in the background, and you will see how it affects the colors on top. Okay. So let's continue here. Let's now go into our middle ground. So we've got these colors, which are all warm colors, but we've modified them with some grays and white. And later on, we're going to put more color on top of it. But let's now move into this zone. We want to get warmer and warmer with these under colors. So now let's put let's mix a. I'm just trying to look at that and just see what color. Maybe we can even see what colors he's using down here. I mean, I think he's probably actually got a yellow like we have here under there, perhaps. But he's also got a lot of blue in here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start painting with some warmer blue. And let's just clean that brush off here. So just like we did here with the cool blue for the sky, I'm going to take my some white and warm blue. Even just still a little bit of gray in here even. Just kind of dirties it down a little bit. Okay. And in fact, that's almost a little bit too white. I'm just going to get a bit more blue on there. Now, I'm kind of speeding along here. I'm a little bit sloppy as I'm painting this. He would have done something a lot more skillful here. I just want to get a little bit of these colors in place. Let's do a bit of... Let's now take a bit of these same colors, a bit of white, take a bit of that gray even. And I'm going to put this in the water here. So I realize I just sort of obliterated some of the work I just did, but that's also why I don't obsess too much about this stage of the whole painting process, because I know I'm going to paint over all sorts of things. You know what? I'm just going to keep on going here with this. I'm not too, like, there's the details. If I was really worried about getting these details in the foreground, then I would I'd paint them darker. So now I'm just adding more warm blue to this mixture, so this will be, there's less and less white in here. So the reason why I'm putting some warm blue down under here, or at the bottom of the painting, is so that when I put some cold colors over top of it, I will see, my eyes will see the nice kind of emerald blue cold color, but it's still gonna come forward. It will want to be closer to me, even though it's a cooler color, because underneath we've got a warm yellow and a warm blue, just sort of like a structure supporting it and bringing it forward. I'm going to go in here and add some warm green. And to make that warm green, I'm going to take, actually let's just do this up here. Warm yellow and warm blue. So I'm going to take a bit of this ugly color and just mix it in a bit. And then I'm just going to go to a smaller brush here. So right now, I'm a little, I don't know why I got a little bit sloppy here, just fast. I'm doing a lot of talking, so this is just I'm just trying to speed this whole situation up. These trees and this hillside. You can see I'm not putting this color on too thick. Then I'm going to come back where there's this little bit of an island thing here. Let's put a little bit of color back there. And I'm even going to now take this green okay. So, where we're at right now, this would be a great place to end for the day. If you wanted to take a break and you want to come back, you know, like this is, you know, you're probably looking and you're like, it doesn't really look like the original, and I totally get it, right? Like, I could paint if I had been painting this for our Intro to Painting course, you know, back in September, I would have done this painting a little bit differently. I would have probably gone and started mixing the colors in the painting almost directly and started applying these. I probably would have tried to mix a blue and put that in there, and a green, or, you know, these magenta colors, and I would just, you know, put some white, and I would do all of that. I'd start kind of really blocking this in. So I'm adding extra steps here. Because I really want to, ideally I really like to get as close as possible to the original. So I am adding an extra step there, but it's probably much closer to the way that Carl Rungius actually made his painting. The other thing, for instance, like if I was on location, if I was standing next to Lake O'Hara, I would probably paint it more like what I was just describing than like this. But if I was, you know, like Tom Thompson, you know, you make that quick sketch and then you go back to your studio, this is more like what I would do. I'd take a little bit more time to prep things so that I can get more nuance in the colors than I might otherwise get when I'm quickly painting away on location. There's flies I'm swatting at and the light is changing, all that kind of stuff. But this is, for me, this is like a great underpainting. This is something I can really work with. Now I can start applying some colors, and when I get this cold color over top of this water here, it's not going to cause some weird optical illusion. At least it shouldn't. You know, let's see here. So let's actually, I just want to do a little bit more work here on the logs and things in the foreground. So we previously mixed this kind of a cool brown and we turned it into a cool gray for the background. I'm gonna do something similar. I'm just gonna mix a cool or warm brown for the foreground. So I'm taking some warm yellow, warm red, and some warm blue. So maybe you can see a little bit of the difference here. So this is the warm brown. Now I think this was our cool brown. It's kind of this little bit here that was, because remember I added a bit of warm red and warm blue to it, and it made it even darker. But this was kind of closer. It was a much more greenish brown that we had before. So because these logs are in the foreground, I want to have more warmer colors in the foreground. So let's so this is, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I'm looking casually at the original. There's obviously going to be some fairly glaring differences in some of this by the end of the painting. One of the things that we can do is do kind of a lot of glazing in this painting. We'll see. We'll be doing some glazing with the water, but if you really wanted to get like a nice, like this like infinite depth effect, glazing would be a great way of getting that. Now let's just sort of look at some of these trees. Sort of like, where's some of the shadows in here? A great way to to try to see those details. It's just like squinting your eyes when you're looking at something. So when I squint my eyes, I see kind of like there's this, like the hillsides kind of coming down through here. So I'm just trying to start capturing where some of the darker clumps of trees are. This is sort of like the under colors and oops. So another little surprise with the lighting. I hope that doesn't interrupt the stream. Okay. So I feel like we've got a great background started. Our foreground is great. I'm really happy with that. So the next steps, let's now go right back to the background. And I think potentially we should be able to finish the background in the next 45 minutes or less, and then focus the remainder of the episode on the foreground. So let's jump into that. So if we're looking at these colors, now this is where we want to try to get much closer to the actual color, whereas we were just sort of putting in these little bit of cooler, muddier colors to sit underneath things. Now, and I was using a much larger brush. Now I'm going to start getting a little bit more focused here. So, and I'm going to be using some glazing fluid as well, because I want a little bit of this to kind of mix with my colors. So let's take our warm blue, let's get a bit more of that. And we're going to be using a lot of white as well. So let's start out with this warm blue, and well, it's actually a bit of warm purple, really. And then I think we'll mix it up here. Okay, and then I'm going to put some glazing fluid in there. So what we've got now is we've got this nice kind of purpley color with lots of glazing fluid, so it won't be it'll be kind of semi-transparent. And now we can start putting it in different places in the background here. Sorry. And it goes on kind of solid, but as it dries, it's going to change, so. technically I could use this same paint for painting the entire rest of the painting, or the background, just depending on how much glazing fluid there is to paint and how many layers of it I put on here. There's a bit of like searching out as I'm going over here. Now let's take a bit more of the magenta. I'll mix this here. See, I love. I know I can totally see that. I'm sure there's people tuning. I mean, I can see. Well, some people are tuning out and rejoining it. I don't know, but that some people might look at this and not see this in the original, and kind of be wondering what we're doing here. Remember, this is gonna, in fact, let's do a little bit of. Well, I'll finish this. Let's put a bit more warm blue in here. Okay. I'm gonna blow dry this, and then I'm gonna start getting a little bit more. I'm gonna add actually probably a lot more white, and then we'll start getting quite specific in that background. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna take this same blue, put this in the sky. So now ideally, once I've done this, the sky should be done. Okay, so let's blow dry that. bag on top of the camera above there. Keep the studio cool. Okay, so now I'm going to start putting some white in and start getting a little bit more precise. So we've got, this is our white. Let's take this off to the side. Take some glazing fluid as well. So you sort of look for, well, let me see before I start painting right in here. I think so another reason why I wanted, I've built up like 3 layers of color here, and it might seem kind of excessive. And again, I don't have to do anything that I'm doing. I could be done this painting by now if I wanted to use certain kinds of other techniques. But in the interest of like really trying to get this painting as close to possible, using a slightly, I would say that much more complex, just maybe a little bit more involved process. But the painting the white over top of the white, it's like the snow is sitting on the mountain, and the mountain has a color, right? So now we have like this much more complex white on the mountain that gives the snow just something to rest on, and something that we can see through. And I might have to do, a little bit of extra white. As this white dries, it's going to go a little bit more transparent again. I'm using some matte glazing fluid or satin glazing fluid. So that's going to change things. And by the way, all my lines are gone, right? I don't have any reference lines. I'm looking at the original for guidance. But I'm also not overly worried about whether I make it perfect or not, right? In fact, I'm just going to take a bit of that blue. Just mix a bit of this blue into my white. obviously I can glaze some blue back over top of anything too to make it kind of pop a little bit more. It's a bit, maybe a little on the grayer side of things. So I think part of this, like the painting kind of ends right here. So I'm just sort of faking out a little bit of some stuff in the background there. Maybe I'll just zoom in for a little bit here. Give some perspective as to where so hopefully that shape helps. You can see that right here in the picture. You also see like he's using these like brush strokes. You can see different colors of brush, you know, all these little bits of blue and white. Okay. Adding a bit more magenta into this color. That's a little bit too much, and didn't put a little glazing fluid in there, so it's a bit intense. So much so I'm just gonna wipe that off. Also, like, I'm holding the paintbrush kind of a little bit further back. I'm moving pretty quickly, and I find, like, if I'm moving quickly, doing it when I'm painting really close up like that is pretty tough. Okay, so now I'm going to take maybe a little bit more of this magenta, cold red. Let's put some glazing fluid on there just to dilute it significantly. Still, there's some white on there. And in fact, just before I do go in there, I'm just going to wipe the paint. I mixed the paint with this brush. I'm going to just wipe that off so that I don't have... Sometimes if I mix with the same paintbrush and then I start painting with it, then I have like all the deep colors that I was just painting with there. It just can be a little bit too intense. So you see, like, this color is you know, on just a regular piece of white, you know, it's like just barely, it's so thin, right? And it's not very bright compared to this, right? Like, look how saturated this color is, pretty thin. But when I'm painting it onto this background, you know, especially when they're surrounded by lots of grays and stuff, it just zings. It like pops to the point where it's like, whoa, I don't know, it's like almost too candy color, right? So it's just such a good reminder that, you know, colors exist in a painting in relationship to the colors around it. And let's say if everything was black here, this pink would just look like neon, right? So we'll do all of this pink, this cold magenta that we've mixed in, and then the next step will be to do the blue, and then we'll be pretty close. I mean, we'll probably go back with some white, maybe a little pink, again, back and forth here and there, but most of the structure should be in here, and obviously, you know, we're moving quickly. You know, if we were to really, he probably could have spent weeks on this painting, whereas, you know, I'm obviously going to try to be done here in a couple of hours at the very, very latest, right? The other thing, you know, when we're painting rocks and mountains, you want to have like a good variation of like brush strokes going up and down and diagonal to kind of show the different planes, as we would refer to them, the different facets of the rocky shapes. So you want your brush strokes to be changing directions, in other words. And that will help kind of emphasize the shape, the form of the mountain. Like ideally, it would be, you want it, when you're thinking about doing this kind of thing, you want it to be clear to the viewer, like what, so that you could like show it to somebody and they could even like think like, oh, the way to hike up this mountain, you could go right up here, you can cut across because this is kind of going right. So it's like we're providing with the direction of our brush strokes, like a map for a climber into this space. Now I'm moving quickly, and I'm not really at all concerned if I get the right colors in exactly the right places. All right, so let's zoom out again. So we're pretty close. Now we've just got to do the bit of a darker blue, and then depending on how much finagling I decide to do. Okay. So I see in the chat there, Maria says, I'm just watching for now, but I'm concerned about those mountains, since I sketched them and I don't know if I'll find the right places for white and purple and so on. Absolutely, great question, or great, you know, I would say everyone watching right now has that same, they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find exactly where some of this stuff goes. It's getting, you know, I'm making it look easy, and probably, I mean, I've got a certain 20 years of experience painting. And a big part of painting is a kind of spatial awareness of where things go. But I do find that like that whole sketching process, especially if once you do a lot of sketching, some of that exercise becomes kind of like a muscle memory function. And by doing it, I start to kind of become aware of the major like if we were to break this down into kind of major shapes, we have this triangle here, we've got a kind of a block here, and then another thing here, and then a few, right? So if you just try to think of like follow a line, or another thing, you could just divide the canvas in half and try to find these kind of the major points, and then work your way from that. And again, you don't have to, like, if I was to accidentally move, let's say this diagonal line, let's say it ended right here, and then this part is sloping. Is it really gonna matter? Is it really, like, even people who've, like, you know, there's a number of people who've shared their photos of visiting this exact lake on the Facebook page. I could probably show those maybe a little bit later, but even people who've hiked in this place, who may have hiked it hundreds of times and know exactly the safest route to get up to the top of that mountain, probably very few of them, even if some of this, quote-unquote, like the anatomy of the mountain was incorrect, probably not even notice. They might look like, huh, I could have sworn there was, and you're like, oh yeah, because I just basically made up all this stuff inside. And you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, because but 99.99999% of people who look at it, you know, 1 out of every million persons would know there's some kind of error that you might have committed along the way. I'm not concerned about those people at all, right? Maybe if you're trying to sell this to the Sierra Club or like a mountaineering association, yeah, maybe that kind of accuracy would be important. But anyway, let's take this. I'm going to take this blue, my warm blue again. I'm going to take a lot of white. Primarily white. Let's mix some of this in here. Okay, let's put some glazing fluid there. And then I'm just going to clean that brush off. Now, I'm going to use this blue for places where there was white and blue, but where we get the deeper blue, I'm probably going to use mostly just my warm blue and like 90% glazing fluid. So I'll get that blue, but rather than adding white in it, which will tint the color, I'll be sort of like mixing it'll mix in our brain. You'll see as we go. I want to kind of throw that out there so that you don't paint this color everywhere, because we don't need it everywhere. So this is where I want this blue that I've mixed here, kind of up here on the top. Right, and that other blue I was talking about, that's what's going to go into some of these places here. So I'm just like finding, okay, there's this dip here is what I'm just kind of tinkering around with right in here. Okay, so I could continue doing this endlessly, but I'm gonna race against time. There's only so much people are gonna watch anyway, right? So I'm just gonna, let's say I'm gonna call it that, and then now I'm gonna do this with my warm blue. I'm also going to later on add some cool red to it to make a purple. So I put some warm blue there. And now I'm going to mix this with glazing fluid. So this is going to be pure warm blue, but mostly glazing fluid. So at first it's going to kind of look like I've added white to it. But this glazing fluid is going to dry transparent, and when it's dry, all we'll see is the blue that was in here. I'm going to go to a bigger brush. Actually, I'm going to blow dry this here. Okay. Maybe let's stay zoomed out for a second. I'll do a little bit of this far away and then we'll zoom in. I'll probably have to do a few layers, like one thing with the glazing, or just like any painting really, is there's a tendency to want to go quickly and solve the problem as quickly as possible. We're an impatient people these days. Glazing is a bit of a slower process that rewards patience. Now, because I'm on a bit of a time constraint here, I'm not going to be able to do. I'll probably just do. I'll do maybe 2 layers of this paint. So this is a very thin layer of the blue. This is my warm blue that I'm putting on top. But you know, just again as a, you can see when I paint it onto the white of the palette, it's almost invisible, right? But it you can see a little bit, hopefully on camera, that it does have some small effect. The reason why I don't want to just take gobs of this warm blue and just throw it right there in the background is it's going to leap forward, and then it's going to compete with the colors in the foreground, which we still have work to do there. But so the more patient you are, the more you're going to get like I think the effects that you really want. Now, again, you know, this is a fairly, you know, there's all doing mountains, doing rocks. That is tricky, and you can you know, a good exercise, like when at an art school, you know, one of the assignments is literally drawing rocks. Go down to a beach, go to a local park, grab some rocks and make a painting of them, because they're really tricky to paint rocks. So I'm just doing my zip method here, just kind of whipping through here. I'm gonna even get a bigger brush. After this pass, I'm going to go a little bit more intense with the blue, but it won't have the effect that I ultimately want, or at least it won't have quite the as much of a satisfying glow to it. So I'm going to blow dry that, and then I'm going to do one more, much more saturated blue. So now I've got my glazing fluid and my warm blue. I'm even, just going to add a little bit of cool blue into this color as I add more warm blue. So it's just going to neutralize the dark depths of that color. So I'm not sure how well it comes across on screen, but you know, as I build this up, now I've got, you know, different colors underneath this blue that I've painted on there. Which I think has a really nice effect. So in an ideal world, I would have built up to this in more layers, and that would have given a really nice, rich glow. But you know, for a couple of hours to be at this point, I think it's not too bad. You can just add a little bit more glazing fluid, just kind of to get a little bit more nuance. Okay, so I think I'll let that dry. I do want to do a little more work on there, but I think I'm going to use the same sort of blues elsewhere, so I might as well just continue painting into here, and then I can use that same warmer blue back over there. Okay, so these trees, let's try to do these trees in about 20 minutes. Okay, let's take a sip of tea here. He's actually using a little bit of this same kind of blue in here, and then I think he's going and adding a little bit of deeper blue afterwards. So let's kind of just do this. Let's take some of our cool blue and warm blue together. There's maybe a little bit of glazing fluid on there. I don't care if it gets on the brush at all. And then let's kind of go in here. And he's kind of, to do these trees, like I see these sort of little kind of blobs of color. So I'm going to kind of just quickly go along and get these. So remember where we put some of that brown? We're going to kind of put this warm and cool blue together into some of those places. I'm also obviously going to go up a little bit, overlapping the background, which is just another little like a trick that we can do to remind people that this is in front of this. Now ideally the colors we use do a lot of that heavy lifting already, but it doesn't hurt. The more techniques you use to help define space and what object is in front of what, just makes it easier. Like, I think in this particular type of painting, your goal is to erase any confusion in the mind of the viewer, right? You don't want them looking at it and going like, wait, like, okay, hold on, what is, I'm a little confused as to what I'm looking at now. Where, right? You want them to be like, oh, cool, I've been there before. That's Lake O'Hara, isn't it? And be like, you know what, you want to, so, you know, and there are tricks. There are techniques, if you want to, maybe is a little less controversial of a word, but they're techniques that artists use to define space. Right, so now we're, I mean, if you kind of squint your eyes, you can see the similarities between mine and his. Obviously, he's got way more detail in his, but we're not too far off here. So what he's got is a combination of this blue, and then we've got some. We haven't really even used the green much yet, but we'll do that here, and then some brown. Right, when that brown, like, is also doing a lot of the heavy work in this part of the painting. Now I'm just going to take some of my warm blue, and I'm just going to take some warm blue and add that a little bit selectively. I don't think it's showing up on camera very well, but it's a different blue than the one that I was just painting with, because it doesn't have any cool blue in it. And it's almost like I can use this as a bit of a shadow. And it now, like, launches forward to the point where, you know what, that might be a little bit too intense, because I don't want it to compete with the foreground. So I may even go over a bit of that with a tiny bit of white in that warm blue, just a bit. A little too much. So like 90% warm blue, 1%, 8% white or something. And even that might be a little too much white, but might have gone a little overboard with that blue. So I'm just going to go in. Do I have any brown left? No, I got to make some more brown. Need some more warm yellow. So I'm putting a bit of this brown back over top of some of that blue. Just because it went a little too much. Not bad, not bad. Okay. Let's do green, warm yellow, warm blue. There's too much red in there. I should have cleaned that brush. So I'm going to take a bit of white, oops, mix it into the color, a lot. I'm going to take a bit of cold blue, maybe even more. Few places in here where we got a bit of this cold blue peeking through, and then warm yellow, a little bit of white, and warm blue. And you don't want to put all of this everywhere. Kind of like, I mean, the problem I did with this blue is I put it everywhere, and it really flattens things out. And that's not the way nature is. Nature is, you know, very dynamic, and so we want there to be lots of variety in here when we're painting these trees. So we want lots of different kinds of green. Okay, I'm also just going to take a bit of this cool yellow and mix that in here. So this is, you know, the fast way of doing things. Not necessarily the absolute best. Yeah. But it'd be great if I had lots more time, but okay. And I'm going to add just a bit of white into this yellow. Okay, we also want a bit of brown in here too, so or kind of like a grayish brown. Okay, I think I need to do more work there, but I do need to move forward. So I'm just going to, let's see if there's this other outcropping here. I can use some of these same colors. So this is just warm red, or sorry, warm yellow and warm blue. Okay, so let's just take a look at where we're at right now. Oops. Okay, that needs, we'll lighten that up. We need some more whitish gray going on in there. Maybe I'll just do a bit of that right now. there's a couple of just like long trees. I think what this painting is also missing is a bit of, there's some oranges that I have yet to do in there. Okay. That's good for our time. Okay. Now let's come down here and let's start putting in the colder color. Actually, yeah, let's do that, and then we can paint over. Or you know what? I'm gonna take some warm blue. Even before the warm blue, I'm going to put some more gray logs down there. Brown logs. I'm going to take some of this white and brown. Let's zoom in. Oops. Come on, where's the edge? There we are. And then I guess let's zoom in here. So this is my brown with some white on it. So this, you know, when we have some, when we glaze over top of things that have white, it reacts to it, and it causes, they kind of like float closer to the surface. I don't know how to even describe it, which is actually kind of nice for this. So there's, you kind of want to be careful about putting too much, using too much white. Underneath the surface, which you're then going to glaze over top of. In fact, it's good. Adding a bit of some greens into these. I just want lots of little stripes of things under the water that Okay. Zoom back out, and then let's, I think that's good enough for these logs. Okay. Ooh, clicking right along here. So now we're going to put some cool blue in and around here. So we're going to get this really nice glowing green emerald kind of thing going on here. What's going on? What have I done? One second here. Okay. So let's take, oops, got some brushes sitting here drying. I need to clean up. Dolores says, I got way too dark, so I will watch and work on my painting again later. Interesting. I wonder where it got too dark. Maybe up in the sky or in the mountains. If it gets too dark, you can always glaze, put some little bit of white and then glaze over. It'll lighten things up. It'll also tint things down, so which is not too bad, especially if it's in the background. It's going to push things back a little bit. You just want to be careful you do too much light glazing in the front, and it's also going to kind of push that back. So let's take some glazing fluid here. Still got all of our cold blue. So let's just mix this into here. And really, I don't need too much white, if anything. Glazing fluid is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Okay. When I just realized I forgot a bunch of trees on the back horizon here. The other thing, as I'm glazing this, I'm trying to go left or right to left, doesn't matter, but horizontally, right? You don't want too many vertical brush strokes in the water, otherwise it's going to look a little bit strange, right? I'm going to try to emphasize the nature of this water, and water lays flat. At least here on Earth it does, right? Oh, that's so gorgeous. Oh my goodness. Right, so what's really nice about that is we have all of these warmer colors underneath this very cold color, and those warmer colors are keeping the water from doing some kind of weird thing where it flops underneath the mountains somehow, right? Okay. I don't know how that looks on camera, but it's so exciting in person. Oh my goodness, that looks great. Now, obviously, the slower I go and the more paint, you know, the more layers of glaze that I put, I'll get a kind of you know, a deeper kind of quality. Right. So, it's so interesting. Like, at least on camera, this looks much like a much warmer blue, right? But that's because we have a warmer blue underneath it, and we got a warm yellow underneath it, right? So we got warm yellow, warm blue here, and now we just painted like our cold blue, and yet so we can see this cold blue here, but it still comes forward. It's like it's the magic of color kind of unfolding right here. So I have no idea what it looks like on your computer screens, but it's doing exactly what I wanted it to. So I'm going to let this dry. Maybe while that's drying, I'm going to come back into the up here and glaze a little bit more with a darker blue. Where can I put this? Okay, so let's clean this up. Take a bit of my warm blue, glazing fluid, and then I'm just gonna come back into some of these areas. So I think I'll do another one of these later on. I'll do another pass. And you know what? I think I'm gonna paint. Well, that's all drying. I'll blow dry everything real quick here. Okay. So I'm actually going to now take the same cold blue that I had, not the warm blue, but the cold blue. And I'm going to continue painting a little bit of it here. I'm going to just sort of, it's like I'm glazing another layer. Yeah, I don't think I probably won't need much of that down here. I'll add a bit of white to it back there. Don't forget, there's got some reflections we'll do as well. Okay. That's exciting. Okay. So I'm going to take some... Yeah, let's go with this brush. So I'm going to take this same color here. Let's add a little bit of white to it. Okay. Right, remember we're going kind of left to right. So I'm just slowly adding a little bit more white to the color here. Let's get this, these rocks. So my image is a little bit different, so I'm going to modify that, and then just give it a bit of a soften it up. Okay, I'm also just going to add just the tiniest fraction of yellow into this color to get a little bit more of that emeraldy kind of thing. And let's put a bit of glazing fluid in there. Like you saw, I mean, there was very little amount of yellow in there. That's the cool yellow. Okay. I'm just going to keep on going here, get a little bit more white, a bit more yellow. So we're almost like going into teal territory here. Get a bit more glazing fluid. Just makes it easier to paint and then to kind of blend if you want to do any of that. You can see I just keep on going over it, and I'm letting it slowly brighten. Rather than just sort of just launching right into it, I'm just taking my time. I do want to get a little bit more of this, but this is our cool blue, maybe even warm blue with white, and really no yellow in it. Whereas down here we're getting more and more greenish color, which looks really nice. But we don't want to use the exact same color all over the place, otherwise it's going to look a little funny. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to take my cool blue again and my warm blue. Just want a little bit of a slightly deeper color. Let's glazing fluid. Alright, so you can tell that's too dark. So I just mix that color, wipe my brush off. I don't need to clean it. Just wipe it off and then just go back in with my glazing fluid, and you can see now it's much more transparent, right? And you could do this endlessly, right? I mean, you can just keep on laying down glazes for hours and hours and hours. Like Leonardo da Vinci. Just glazing and glazing and adding more and more depth. More and more subtlety and nuance. Okay. I'm going to take just some of this warm blue. I'm just going to mix it in here directly. And then I'm just going to go, let's zoom in again. You know what needs, I can't paint that just straight off warm blue. I'm going to take a bit of this cold blue. This needs to be modified a little bit. Made not quite so intense, but so this is kind of the look of some of the water, where it's kind of maybe deeper. There's shadows underneath some of where these logs are. Like when I see this, I love, like, this tells me, like, this is somebody who's really looking quite carefully. Let's move this over. And if you do this a little bit too intensely, then you can always just go back and glaze some of this kind of cool blue back over top of any of this. Oops, so zoomed in. Yeah. Okay. Just gonna clean a couple brushes here. And I think I want a bit of a brown. Do I have a... Okay, good. Got a little bit of brown left. This is my warm brown. Let's take a bunch of white, though. Add that to it. Let's use this color for a moment. And... now we're looking at any kinds of tree parts that might be sticking out of the water a little bit. Okay, I'm going to slowly add a little bit more of this warm yellow. I'm debating, I don't know if I'm going to do that. I can see, this other log right here, just out of time. I think I might just keep my painting to what I've got here already. So I'm just going to take this is warm yellow. It's gotten a bit muddy as I've been painting with it for the past few minutes, but as I continue to paint, I think it'll get a little bit more intense as the paint that was already on my brush kind of goes away. Let's zoom back in just so you can see me kind of bouncing around the canvas here. So I don't want to put this yellow everywhere again. I'm just thinking about, like, you know, some trees are going to get more light than others, and depending on the time of day, so... Okay, I want to just do a quick little glaze with this color, with this warm yellow. Taking this paint, mix it in with some glazing fluid. So I should just wipe my brush off. Let's take a bit of warm red and mix that. So I kind of smudging some of the glaze away a little bit. So that just tells me that it's still quite wet. So I'm just mixing a kind of a orangey color. Okay, let's go in and get just a bit more of a brown. Touch that up a bit. I mean, you can see, like, towards the end of the painting, I'm just using these, like, dried up paint that's kind of globbed on, and I try to mix it back into something. Okay, we're gonna get some darker colors coming in, or like almost a black maybe in here shortly. There's my warm yellow. Okay, let's do the trees in the far background. Those trees almost look like this color right here, which is my cool blue and cool yellow with some white. All right, we got cool green trees back there. So let's zoom in. Right, we want a contrast between these warm trees and these cool trees back there. This is where all the hipster, the cool hip trees live, right? But they're cool dudes. Okay, they're a little bit bright, so I might glaze a little bit over top of them. Or, I mean, I could darken them just by painting over them, but let's see if we zoom back out. I still might do a little bit, go darker up there. I mean, there are a few of these that need to go even brighter, so let's just take a bit more, do a few trees. So these ones I'm just doing here real quick. Just added a bit more yellow into some of them. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm about like 10 minutes away from finishing up. Okay, so the final things that I want to do, I need to add some white onto some of these logs, and that's going to make them pop. I need to maybe I'll use a little bit of black. I want to do a little bit of brown, like just some lines, maybe some white on these shoreline areas. And I might even take a little bit of blue, go back into here and darken the blue here. So a few things on that checklist. Glaze with the warm blue for a quick minute here. I'm just going to paint right over these trees I've just painted, right? I think that's good enough for that background. Obviously, I could tinker and tool around in here for a while, but that would take me a little bit more time. Which I love doing. This is my favorite part of making a painting. I see like everything else is sort of like leading up to this. And there are other people whose their favorite part of the painting is that first 10 minutes of wildness, and you can see how different kinds of artists, as they have different kinds of, they like different aspects of the painting process, turn that into, they end up focusing on that as part of their style, right? Okay, I think I do want to do, I think it looks okay on camera, but up in person it just feels a little bit, just a little messy. So I'm taking some warm blue. Let's zoom in. I'm going to spend 5 minutes just trying to do a little bit of clarifying in here. So this is warm blue and a little bit of cold blue, maybe just a tiny bit of white. You could also use a bit of gray. So I want there to be this diagonal movement up here. So rather than, if I do lines, I want them ideally to be sort of climbing up the hill. The shadows are kind of going upwards. There is a kind of a warm red in this mixture. Let's take some warm red and warm blue. We'll get like a really dark kind of crimson brown. I'm going to take this same crimson red that was just, it's warm red with warm blue. This brush is getting pretty dry. I think we're just going to add the slightest bit of black to that color. Back here. Okay, and then just looking down at the bottom. I want some white on that back horizon, mixing it in with this warm blue, or back shoreline. Okay, oh yeah, let's do a bit of that white on here. So I'm not going to outline the entire shoreline. But having a little bit of that, I think, is really helpful. Okay. Let's just plow ahead, almost done here. Okay, so let's zoom out and just see how things look here. So you can see like those pops of white really sort of launch things closer to us. And I'll even just take a bit of black. I don't want to put that black on just all by itself, so let's mix some warm blue into it. You're just going to get a tiny bit of glazing fluid. Come on. Oops. I meant a tiny bit, but... And then, you know, you could take this and put a bit of it down here, just like we did with the whites. Let's zoom in. Oops, right. Not on the screen. Okay. I might be done here. That's probably enough time anyway. Yeah. I would like to spend more time fiddling around, but I think, you know, for the most part, I've achieved what I set out to do. Just final looks here. Let's just want to guess that could be more white, couldn't it? Could we put... Okay, cold blue and white. Let's make a bit of a purple that I can connect. Maybe I should zoom in here 1 second. Let's see just sort of what I've been tinkering at. Is this little area right in here. Okay, I think I gotta call it a day. So, yeah, obviously there's definitely some changes. I could even continue doing some of the glazing down here and make this even colder. Using more cold blue down here. But I like how this turned out. We'll see. Usually later on at night I take another look and just see how they all turned out, what it looked like on camera versus this. But yeah. Okay. 3.5 hours work. This is one of my favorite paintings that I've seen in a while, so this probably took him a couple of days at least. I'm just going to put Lake O'Hara, BC. Circa. He painted this lake many times. So if you do a search for it and you're trying to find like the actual one, you'll have to look for a while to find it. But this one I think is his high point of this type of a painting that he did. These just pure landscape paintings. He didn't do that many of them relative to the rest of the work he did, and I think this is just gorgeous. So, you know, again, I'm not sure how it looks on camera versus in person. It does look like maybe not, you know, I think it'll look different across the room than it does up front. You know, my nose has been hovering over this painting for the past 3 hours. And I admittedly even began this pretty quickly. I'm not sure even why I sped through the trees, but I did. And I think I recovered pretty well. Okay. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, I would love it if you were to like and subscribe to the channel. I know many of you already have, but the vast majority of you haven't. Something like 80% of the people who watch these videos have never subscribed to the channel. So, that would be I'd be very grateful for that. If you want to leave a donation, there's a link to PayPal below. And if you want to send a check or money order, you're certainly welcome to do that. And yeah, one of these, I'm looking forward to September. I'm going to be back on campus teaching in person at Emily Carr. So that's that'll be interesting to see how that works. So also in the fall, if you are interested in sending anything large, because I know some people have done that in the past, it's a little easier to send things directly to the university that way, because I have a mailbox. I've only been to a campus once since the last year, and there was some mail there. So thank you everyone for painting along with me. Please upload your version of today's painting to the Facebook group. I would love to see how yours turned out, even if you're not super happy with it, because this weekend on Saturday I'm going to be taking a look at the artwork that you guys have been making, mostly the paintings we did through Asian History Month. So the Lin Fengmian, Wu Guangzhang, who else did we paint? Yoshitomo Nara, Yayoi Kasuma, etc. That's what we'll be focusing on Saturday. So Saturday at 1 o'clock Pacific time, we're going to be celebrating your artwork. And then on Sunday at 1 o'clock, we're going to be painting a portrait of Nelson Mandela for Nelson Mandela Day. I'm super excited about doing that, because I feel like it's been a while since I painted a portrait. So I'm excited to do like just a head. We've done lots of larger full body paintings, so that's going to be for our Paint the News series, which I have done a while. And then next week we're painting a few paintings, and then I'm premiering a new series. I'm not sure how often I'll do it, but painting images from video games. And we're going to start with a couple of paintings from Fortnite next Wednesday. So, okay, everyone. So enjoy the rest of your evening. We will see you guys in a couple of days. And thanks again for being so active on the Facebook group. I apologize, I haven't had much of a chance to participate in that, but I'll try to do that. Well, my contribution will be the episode on Sunday, and Saturday, my feedback episode. Anyway, blah 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 blah. We'll talk to you guys soon. Good night.